Nah, man. Here we are. Ryan, it is rainy and cold here in Vancouver right now. West Vancouver, where we are.
And dark.
And dark. And dark. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I was used to getting up in the dark, but then when I leave my office at 5:30 at my practice in the city, it would still be light. And all of a sudden, one day, it's like, oh, I get up in the dark and I leave my office in the dark. And it's just weird. It's like, oh, it's like I haven't lived the day. I've been
Yeah, right.
inside like all day long.
Never saw the sun.
Yeah. And it reminded me of something that I wanted to chat about today was that this idea that life becomes for a lot of us as parents, as dads, as entrepreneurs, as business owners, just as people, as guys. Like we go through so much of our life and it just becomes this monotonous grind. Or it's not necessarily even a grind, but it's just the days just go by and things, I got up in the dark and I leave in the dark. Like there's just not a whole lot. There's not this big arc that seems to happen. And there's a lot of stuff. And I was just reflecting earlier this morning on this fort that we made in our playroom just over here. And it's this giant fort. It takes up half of the room. And I took a bunch of light stands that I use for video shoots to create this big roof for the fort, so it looks like this big circus tent in there. And the kids have created over. It's been up for about a week and a half. They've created different sections of it, so now they have different rooms in this thing. I mean, they're all kind of tiny, but it's a big fort. And over the week and a half that it's been there, it's been a restaurant, it's been a castle, it's been a hotel, it's been a spa, it's been what else has it been? Just been like a regular house, it's been a fort, it's been all of these things. And I remember this morning walking into the playroom, and I brought my daughter some breakfast because she woke up hella early this morning. She woke up at 4:55 this morning because why not? And I was looking at that fort and I was thinking about isn't it interesting that this is just the fort with a bunch of blankets that we made. Yet for our kids, it was all of these things. It was their imagination just ran wild and created this amazing world out of this little thing that we built. And I thought that was something that really struck me, that, that's something that to encourage that spirit in them, to always be creative within themselves, to use their imagination, to see a world different than what is out there. That, it can be more than, the world can be more than just dark when you wake up and dark when you leave the office. That there is something in that, in sometimes our insistence to see the world as it is, that we correct the subtle kind of like inconsistencies on how, the official world is and how things should be. And I think that's something that I want my kids to teach me more of, is like, yeah, the world can be a much more magical place if we just so choose. That I can look out into a room and see a castle, or I can see, in one moment it's this. Just like, we've all seen like little kids get more excited about the cardboard box that their Christmas presents is in than the actual, the gift. How many times have I thought, like, fuck, we should just give them a bunch of cardboard boxes. Like, like my Christmas would be a lot cheaper. It'd be great. And they'd probably have just as much fun. If not more fun, because then they actually have to create something. So I guess the point I'm making, what I wanted to bring up, is just this idea of, that we can all begin to see things from a new perspective. And that this world is, that we can add to it as much as possible in our own way, and allow that magic to return for us as adults and as dads, that we can bypass the being monotonous about things and see the extraordinary in the ordinary. And so what are your thoughts on that? My little revelation from this morning.
I love it, man. I got nothing to add. It's good. Let's go.
Good night, everybody.
No,
Remember, if you're drinking, don't drive, and if you're driving, don't drink.
No, that's a beautiful thought. I think that's awesome, man. I mean, because we've said this before, right? You can make things mean whatever you want. I mean, it's up to us. And you could look at that, and like you say, it could be a couch and a cloth. You could look at that and go, make it mean like, oh, it's a mess in my living room. This has got to get cleaned up. You could look at that and go, oh, I wish, that we had a bigger couch. I mean, there's so many other ways you could look at that, right? You could look at that and go, as a kid, and with some magic and some imagination, and look at it as a castle. Mm-hmm. I reflect a lot on that in terms of like, where in my life, like even just right now in this conversation, where can I see this isn't just two dudes on, some screens just talking, like how can I look at this with a little bit of magic, with a little bit of imagination, with a little bit of curiosity. And same with, the day to day, right? My taking the kids to school, making them breakfast, is it just throwing some food on a plate, or how could I bring a little bit more fun, a little bit more imagination to something like making breakfast or taking them to school, or,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think about just when we go through things, like say for our kids, I remember this too, when we were going on a trip. Like we took all the kids, we took them to Mexico, a year and a half ago, or whatever it was. And I remember thinking like, oh, once we get there, all of these cool things that we can do, all of these fun experiences we can have. And when we talk about that trip, my kids often talk about us getting up the day of the trip to go to the airport. I was like, oh, like, fascinating. Like the experience for them started then. It wasn't like once we get to the destination, I want to have all these things. It was like that was the experience. Like it started here. Their experience, the magic of it, part of it was just in that journey. And it's like, wow, like that's such a, I don't often think about that. Like for us, sometimes I remember that trip, like it was stressful that morning, because a lot of the responsibility of getting everybody ready, making sure we're on time, packing the car, all that stuff was on me. And so I was just in organized dad mode, and gave no thought to the fact that, oh, this is the journey. Like this is the stuff that they'll remember. Mm-hmm. And that, it's just really, really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And I, and we forget those things, right? Like I can think back to how fond a memory I have of just like, if we go back to the fort there or a family trip, like I can remember those things. Like I can remember making a fort, and I can remember the feeling of the wall of the couch. Like we had this recliner thing that was kind of a funny shape, but we'd flip it over and we'd drape stuff over it. But I can remember being in there, and I can remember the feeling of the fabric of that couch being flipped on its side. But like, it is those little things and those details. It's a really good conversation as we get older to remember what it's like to be a kid, mm-hmm. and to let not our kids be kids, and let ourselves be kids sometimes. And I think it's an amazing exploration.
Yeah, it's something that I remember hearing from, I believe it was Dr. Peter Attia. He was talking about how when he gets frustrated with things, something that he was taught to do, like an exercise to do, like something is just pissing you off, your kids are just like going nuts and there's stuff everywhere. He said, take a moment and like take a step back and think about you as an 80-year-old, you as a 90-year-old, like looking back on this experience and thinking, like I think about when my kids were so young, when we were talking about this the other day with my kids. Of all things, we were talking about changing diapers and pooping in their diapers and how newborn poop smells like yogurt. Anyways, it was a big conversation. It was great. And I remember in those moments, I remember thinking, oh my God, I cannot wait till we're out of this phase of just being in diapers, like having to change diapers all the time and these blowouts and like poop up their back and all that stuff that comes along with that.
Right. Yeah.
And then but all of a sudden when it's gone, it's like, oh, I miss those times. Like I miss that. And that's something that I find challenging to do, but when I'm able to do it, like now, if my kids are they're being loud, it's time for bed. It's like, oh my God, like I'm just exhausted. I just want to go to bed myself. Like, oh, like can you guys just shut up and go to sleep? I think about, well, like, but when these times are gone, I'm gonna miss this. I'm gonna miss this, and so it's one of those things that helps just bring me back to the moment. Like, no, this is a precious thing I'm in right now. It's like this pocket of time.
Yeah. How to be grateful for grateful for the mess of the fort, grateful for the noise, grateful for the poop, the stuff that, I mean, again, yeah, you could look at it many different ways, right? You could look at it with frustration. You could look at it with, oh, I just want this to be done, like you're saying, or you can look at it like, no, this is the only time in my life this is the last time I'm going to be changing this diaper, you know what I mean? Or I'm not going to be doing this for very long. This is the only time they're going to be like this. Like they're not, my 15-year-old isn't making forts anymore. So
Right.
can I really appreciate it with my last one that's coming through that phase right now?
Yeah, I think I think when my youngest, like the last time I changed her diaper, like I had no idea that was going to be the last time.
Right.
I remember around that time going, oh, I can't wait. This is done. And so there's so many things I can think back, like, wow, like I had no idea that was going to be the last time. When I think about some people that, people that we've lost in our lives, like I find it feels so much more, like it brings so much more reverence to time and experience when I can just think of the idea that like this might be the last time. The old saying that, live as this is your last day.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like that's big. And I think it just gives a lot of perspective to everything, that like, this is it. This is all we've got. This is literally all we've got. We're not promised tomorrow. I'm not promised to wake up tomorrow. This is it.
Yeah. Yeah. It reminds me of, the last book I read, I think we talked about before, I think it's called The Power of Showing Up. Like just be like really present in these moments, with our kids, with ourselves, with what doesn't matter, our spouses and life. Like it can be short if we just go through the motions, and it's day after day, and you wake up, you go to work, you come home, go to bed. Life can, there's so many cliches and sayings out there about just life will pass you by. But yeah, with our kids especially, that's what this podcast is about, is the reminder that there is this special time that we have with them, this special window, and how truly present can we be? And how truly present can we be to their reality? Like you're saying, like you're really tuned in to what they're experiencing, right? That they're looking at the sport as the restaurant and as a castle, and but to notice that, like you're present, like you're tuned in to where they're at, right? You're not looking at it like, oh my God, I can't wait till we can just clean this thing up. Like, I just think that's really, yeah, that's really special. And, you know, there's even, I even think about like, man, when was the last time, like my daughter made one recently with one of her friends that was over. And like, when was the last time like I could actually get myself, you know, if I was to be really tuned in and present and explore the magic out of it, I'd be like, I'd take on a character too and like start to come, you know, and come in and help be a part of that magic and wonder with them. But yeah, just a great reminder to just be really present to their experience of things and
Hmm.
yeah, have a little bit of magic.
Yeah, and I think especially going into a moment like that, I can I liken it to sometimes like a workout, going to the gym. Like yesterday morning when I got up, it was cold and I was exhausted, and I thought to myself, "Oh, maybe I just won't go to the gym today. Maybe I won't do it. Maybe whatever bullshit excuse I gave myself." And then I got in my cold plunge, and the same thing. I didn't want to get in the cold plunge. Oh, maybe I won't do that today. And yet when I get in, I was so glad that I did. I was so happy that I did. Then I went to the gym, and I was so glad that I did. And I can think back. I don't know that I've ever regretted going to the gym. Never regretted going through the challenge of getting myself to go and being challenged and lifting weights and going through that thing, and then afterwards going, oh, well, I feel kind of worse because of that, or I feel and I think the same thing with our kids. It's something, I mean, a lesson I'm taking away for me for today is when my kids want to engage with me, and when things in the moment going, oh, like I just don't want to do this. I'm tired or whatever. To think that no, like once I get past this, once I get into this thing, I'll look back and I won't regret doing this. Like I'll be better off for doing this. Like last night, many nights, my daughter, my oldest one, will ask me to do a meditation for her when I'm lying the kids are both lying in their beds and I'm lying on the floor in between them. I just lie there for a couple of minutes with them, and they'll usually ask me questions, some silly question about whatever, as they're trying to get to sleep. And my daughter will ask me to do a meditation, and so many times I'm like, oh, I don't want to do it. Like I just don't want to think about what I have to say or think about doing one. But every time I feel so much better for having done it. Like it happened last night too. I remember last night thinking, oh, most nights I don't want to do this, but then I always feel way better when I do. And it's like you'll never regret, or I'll never regret putting in a little bit of extra effort to be present with my kids, and I'll never regret putting in a bit more presence, putting a bit more intention, putting a bit more energy into the things that matter to me. Like I won't ever regret that. It's weird, right? Like how we
Yeah.
have this resistance to starting, but then once we're in it, it's like, oh, this is amazing. Why was I trying to stop myself from doing this? Why was I trying to stop myself from having this experience? And what do you think that is in us that makes us just go, nah, maybe I don't want to do it. Even though we know at the end of it, it's going to be life is way better. It's like we don't ever regret this. What do you think that is?
Yeah. I totally know what you're talking about. And yeah, it's like, because you could pick the easy or the comfortable or the safe, you know, path and be like, oh, well, maybe this resistance isn't a good thing. Maybe I shouldn't go. Maybe I shouldn't do this thing. But you're right. Like it's so often that the resistance is like, no, that is the next thing that we're supposed to work through or do. I don't know. I'm sure there's a saying like the challenge is the way, right? Like that's so many. Yeah, it's that discernment. Sometimes it isn't. You know, sometimes there is that like, nope, this isn't the right thing for me to do right now. But yeah, in those cases that you're sharing, I guess yeah, I don't know what it is. I can totally relate. But yeah, I don't know what it is. It's like, I mean, the only analogy I can think of is like the gym, right? Where you don't get stronger, you don't grow unless you do lift something a little heavier than the last time, or if you don't do a little bit more than you did last time. It's just funny how, well, again, I think of life like a video game sometimes where you don't get to the next level unless you pursue through something that was difficult. Like there needs to be challenge for it to be fun.
Mm-hmm.
There's no, you know, the game, the movie, whatever it is, it isn't going to be very entertaining. Like our life's not going to be a very good story if it was just easy and we're on, cruise control the whole time.
Hmm.
But sometimes when you're in it, you're like, like really, I gotta get over this hump again. But I guess, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it just makes the whole story of life that much more interesting for ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I believe this, that if it doesn't challenge us, it doesn't change us. And so often we change and we see breakthrough and get breakthrough in our life because of the challenges. And man, like being a dad is certainly a challenge. It certainly is not for the faint of heart. And it certainly is something that reveals to us more depths of who we can be or who we are. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Yeah, like if it was sometimes if it was just too easy, if it was too, if we just kind of sat in that monotonousness of moments and experiences, that yeah, like it would just, things would just pass us by. And it's when those things kind of trigger us out of the, yeah, out of that monotony, that whoa, like that's when things can happen. That's when things can change. That's when things can transform. And
Yeah,
I
if
think
you
it's
take
like
on
for,
yeah.
yeah, and I think for our kids too, it's like when they are challenged as well, like that's something that I believe that we can support them so much more on. You know, I know we've talked about this a ton, but it seems as though we want to give our kids so much more than we ever had. And at the same time, there's a balance that what we really need to give them is the courage and the strength and the resilience and the belief and the hope and the grace of knowing that they can and will figure it out for themselves. That we're there as guides, not as the ones that are just going to do stuff for them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's yeah, like I can think of, like with our kids, I can think of, I have to think of a specific example, but I could see how easy it can be, as you're saying there too, like wanting our kids the best for them, wanting them to be better than us, like, but there's so many different styles. Like your kid could come up against a challenge and you could say to them, you could, then they could be really frustrated or really upset or really distraught, and you could pick the easy path for them and be like, oh, maybe this isn't for you. Maybe we should do something else. You don't want them to get upset. You're trying to protect them from their emotions. There's that path, right? In terms of just
Mm-hmm.
coddling them. Then there's the parent that could come over the top and be like, no, you have to do this. You need to do this. You could force them as this, what is it? Authoritarian style, or is that the right word? Like dictatorship, like you are going to do this. You could get that. You could pick that path with them and force them to do it. Now they're doing it against their will. Or, so there's like this discernment, like with our kids, right? Is like, what is this challenge? Is it in their best interest to pursue it? And then there's the, sort of the middle ground of like challenging them, but asking them questions, right? Like, well, why do you think this is so hard? What do you think this means for you? You could take
Mm-hmm.
them through a process where they could end up working through it through themselves. And then they get that empowerment of, oh, I did this, right? It wasn't my dad who pushed me through this, or it wasn't that, I got off the easy way and I never even faced these challenges. But I feel like it's such a discernment and such a dance to know if it's a good challenge for them to figure out and go through, or if it is
Mm-hmm.
something that'd be like, what, this isn't your hill to climb right now.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to think about that as this, in this developing world, that like I remember when we were younger, it was not necessarily a rite of passage, but it was made important to me that I should learn how to drive a stick shift. When I learned how to drive, like that was important. Even though we never had a car, I never had a car, or no, like, or my parents never owned a car. Well, when I was driving age, anyways, that had like a manual stick. I think for people growing up, they don't even know what that is, like a manual stick shift to drive. And I think about like for our kids, for my kids, like they may even not even ever have to learn how to drive.
Hmm.
Yeah, like it's all going to be automated, and like we're moving so much to so much more automation that so many more things are going to be done for them. Like we're wanting so many more things done for us.
Hmm.
Yet I also believe that at this point, like we have, or I believe I have a base of, I guess, of understanding that these tools, these AI things, these kind of automation tools are things that just allow me to dive deeper into what I know I'm best at. Like I really get to connect with things that are in my zone of genius. Not just that I'm using all these tools to just automate my life away and I can just be just do nothing. But I can really use them as tools to help me get better and help me fulfill my mission better and help me have more impact and grow my vision. And it makes me a little nervous to think about all of these things that will be automated and done for my kids. It's like, what would be the thing? Like, what would be the thing for them that I'm like, no, no, like you need to learn how to do this because it's difficult, and you may never learn how to, like I've used a stick shift twice in my life
Mm.
because a friend of mine had a stick shift that I remember having to drive them home, and it was like I was so thankful that I learned so I could do it, but that was 20 years ago. That was whatever it was. That was a long ass time ago. But it was a skill that I learned that, like, yeah, like and in this world, like they don't even make manual cars anymore. It's like what is the skill that our kids are going to learn that will just essentially be obsolete. But it's like you're learning a skill, you're learning something challenging because there's more than just this skill, but the principles of this skill. Like what like can you like what can you think of something? Can you think of something that might be like a skill worth learning for our kids that isn't necessarily applicable, but is just, I don't know, just in principle, it's like it's good to learn things that are either tactile, manually tactile, or something that is, like I've talked to you a bit before about the samurai Musashi, who said that once you see the way broadly, or once you understand the way broadly, you can see it in everything. Meaning that there's principles that apply from something that you can apply to then everything in your life. And the more that we can apply the skill that we learn here to everything in principle, then the better off will be. Like, can you think of a skill for our kids? Because it certainly won't be manual stick shift driving. It certainly won't be.
Well, my son,
Like even a couple of years ago, people thought it was going to be coding. Everyone was like, you got to learn how to code. All the kids learn how to code. All these people and now that's like literally in 2 years, 3 years, that's become almost obsolete.
right?
Because of AI. Like that's nuts.
Sure. Yeah, and I totally get you. Yeah, I wonder if that samurai. Yeah, it sounds like that quote is very similar to "How you do anything is how you do everything." Is that,
Yeah.
Would you say? Yeah. But he probably coined that hundreds of years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
A few hundred years.
but yeah, it's interesting, right? Because there obviously is more and more things that we're making easier, and so you can grow up even more so now and not have to learn how to drive stick. I totally get you, right? Like you can like just think about how easy it is to order things, at least where we live in this part of the world, something on Amazon, right? Now it comes same day or overnight. Like it's like instant almost, food. You don't have to learn how to cook. You can just order DoorDash. You can order food to your door. You don't have to drive anywhere. You can get it, pretty soon. And you can get an Uber. You can get a driverless car pretty soon. So yes, there are so many things that we don't have to learn anymore, that you're right, that you and I would have. I remember learning, my first car was a stick shift. My son still he's like, oh, could I get a stick shift? Like he wants to learn that, but not that I get it, right? It's not the skill It's not the actual skill of learning how to drive stick. That's really important here because you're right. Like that's going to be obsolete. Same with the coding itself. But for me, as you asked that question, like what is something that is really important for them to learn? For me, I have a couple thoughts. One is it's how to learn. It's the process of learning, like how to learn how to learn, like
Mm.
how to go
Hmm.
through learning how to drive stick, how to go through learning how to code, go through that process of, I don't know how to do this, like that. I like to be able to do things pretty well. So if I encounter something that I'm not good at, immediately there's some resistance of, oh, man, you make us start making excuses. Maybe I don't need to do this. Maybe this isn't something I need to learn. But just going through that process from, I don't know how to do this at all. This is really uncomfortable and foreign for me, to going through that progress to like, oh yeah, I know how to do this, right? Like I think that's, no matter what, yeah, I think that's super important for us, for kids, to be able to learn how to learn and to be excited, like find things that they're excited to learn as well. Like, because learning's not fun if it's something that you don't like if it's a subject matter you don't like. This is the whole thing I loved about homeschooling. We did it for a while, and I really took some of that forward into my kids' lives in other areas where it's all about, my opinion, what I've learned from it was finding something that they're passionate about, which is, there needs to be this like shotgun sort of exploratory approach, or just really tuned in to your kid. I mean, like, oh, they love horses, or what, they love castles, they love math, they love numbers, they love sewing. You find something they're passionate about, and then give them the opportunity and support them to learn how to really get good at that. And then for me,
Hmm.
there's so much in that, and that's where again, we've talked about this before too. That's why I love, for my kids, and maybe I've influenced this, maybe not, but they love some sports. That was a big thing for me growing up, and I'm so happy that they've found things that they love, which are not sports that I played, but they love them. And in that, they're able to go through this process of, like, someone can't play the sport for them. So now it's on them to go from, I've never done this before, to, okay, how do I get really good at something that I love? I just think that process, that pursuit, that learning, that growth, that to me is super, super valuable for them, because then they can take that. It's not about learning how to drive stick, right? It's not learning how to be an amazing skier per se, right? That might not be all that useful when you're 45. Who knows, right? Maybe you end up turning into a whole life. My son could, but for
Hmm.
me, if he doesn't, I don't. It's not about, for me. It's not about being an amazing skier. It's about the process he's been able to go through to learn how to become something great, and to learn how to
Yeah.
get really great at something. That, to me, that skill is transferable to anything in life.
Yeah, that's true. And it reminds me of last week I was talking with our mutual friend Suki, and he was talking to us about, or he was talking to me about his experience doing the Ironman race, the World Championships in Kona,
Yep.
and we were discussing, we were kind of philosophizing about, like, what is it about physical pursuits that, like, really challenging physical pursuits that make it so inspiring to so many people. Like, I remember watching the Ironman triathlon championships, like, on TV, like, as a kid, like, just being mesmerized by this thing.
Hmm.
And, like, why are athletes, like, really, like, top athletes, like, revered for, for this thing that they do. And one of the things we came up with, or that we kind of landed on, was this idea that we think about our life as body, mind, spirit, like a body, mind, soul. Like, there's all, we compartmentalize these different parts of our life, and a physical pursuit is something that really engages all parts. Like, it really
Right.
unifies everything. That once that we can exhaust the body to then really understand that there's more to us, that once my body is done, like, I'm just physically exhausted, that my mind is much bigger than that. And even at that, once I exhaust my mind, I find that, oh wow, there's even a deeper thing inside of me, which is my spirit, which is my soul, that is just massively abundant in energy and resources. And so but it took going through the process, going through the physical process to even to get to that point. And it's like this great unifier. So I think you're absolutely right. Like learning something for kids, like sports is yeah, it's so, I think it's so key, it's so great because not because it's they do something that is, yeah, it's yes, it's good for them physically. Yes, they learn some skills, physical skills, but yeah, they learn so much more, like the principle of patience. They learn the principle of grit. They learn the principle of, if it's a team thing, it's of cooperation, of like, yeah, how to learn, like how to tame this mind of mine, how to harness my mind to do this a difficult task, how to problem solve, how to yeah, all of those things, and we bring that all into something that then we think about all the biographies and all the things that of from Michael Jordan to Kobe Bryant to the David Goggins of the world. Like we learn so much about the human condition through difficult physical pursuits and through physical skills, through physical something. And it seems so basic, but I think you're absolutely right. Like it's so key. It's like that the basic skills of sport or some sort of physical pursuit there's a broad application to everything in life. Like there's philosophical implications that once we tap into our body, right? Tap into this thing that, these little things that carry around our souls every day.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good. I hadn't thought about that part of it too. Why maybe I like physical pursuits, as something that's, I think, super, super helpful for a kid to learn how to do. Because as you're saying, it is that unifying piece, right? They could be really good at video games, for example. And I know that, in the world of esports, those players do train physically quite a bit. I think for the average kid who's getting really good at video games, I don't think that's quite as unifying in terms of mind, body, and soul. I have my opinion on that, unless you're, going to become the guy who played Gran Turismo or whatever that, story was, where he became a world champion car racer from playing the game. But anyways, but
Mm-hmm.
physically, yeah, I can see how you are going to be able to combine, your whole self in a big pursuit of something. Ironman obviously being an extreme case of it, where you can't do that just by being physically capable, right? That is such a mental pursuit in terms of how much you have to put in to get to that point. And
Mm-hmm.
it is very deep at a soul level too, right? Because you are going to get challenged, unlike, anything most of us are going to be able to do. I also think that's part of the appeal, the inspiration of seeing someone do something for 12 hours, 11 hours, 10 hours, 17 hours, whatever their time is. That's just like so for most of us who just aren't interested or aren't willing or aren't able to train for that amount to do something like that. I mean, most of us, I think, could, not at the world level, but most of us probably could finish one if we really decided to dedicate ourselves. But just, are we willing to? But I just think when I see someone do something like that, or like, someone who, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, I think of when he became Mr. Universe and all these kind of titles he won, like to get yourself to that point, whether we want to totally recognize it or not, we do subconsciously go like, oh my God, like that's so far from where I am right now. That must have taken so much work. I mean, that, there's, I find how deeply inspiring that is, because I can appreciate how much went into that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, yeah, I guess that's part of also, as you were bringing this up, like that to me is maybe why I think finding a physical pursuit can be super helpful for a kid, because, yeah, you get the mental, you get the health benefits of just being active, being social, being outside, being all these things. And then they get all these intrinsic values and all these intrinsic things that they're going to be able to carry forward in life, in terms of being able to learn how to, yeah, as you're saying, go through all of these challenges that are going to show up in whatever that
Mm-hmm.
pursuit is. Being able to set a goal and being able to realize it and go through, that whole process of trying to achieve something that's, more difficult than you thought was possible. Yeah, it's a good reminder for me too, because there's a lot for me that I find super valuable in being able to support a kid to pursue something physically that they're passionate about.
Yeah, and just to bring it back around to my fort, that
Hmm.
when we do something, when we pursue something in the physical realm, that there's the thing that we're doing, but yet there's also like, it's like, how can we look at this a different way? Like, how can I look at, say, like my running, going for a run? A run can just be, I'm going for a run. I'm putting one foot in front of the other and I'm getting some exercise. And it could potentially be, hey, I'm going to explore my neighborhood. It could be, I'm going to let off some steam. It could be that I'm going to process through, I'm using this physical thing to process through something that I've been going through mentally. Like, how can I use a thing that I'm already doing in this physical world and look at it a different way? How can it be something completely different that can fill my world up in a much bigger way? Like, how can I look at this fort? Like, how can it become a castle today? How can it become a restaurant? How can this thing that stands that I created be something different for me today? So I think
Yeah.
for all of us, it's again, what can our pursuits, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, like how can we see them in just a bit of a different way? What can we use to teach us something just a little bit more that's just maybe beyond the surface, that we don't have to necessarily wake up in the dark and leave in the dark, that we can see things in a new light. And what can life teach us today through our physical pursuits?
Yeah. It's a very good question. And when when I hear you saying all that, it's also, yeah, it's because we don't want it to turn into something that's monotonous, right? Like we wouldn't want, like if I take the example of our kids pursuing something, like I wouldn't want, if it's something they're passionate about, I wouldn't want it to turn into just like this dark, monotonous thing that they're doing that no longer has that flair, that fun, that passion to it. You know what I mean? Like you're saying with the fort. So sometimes, same for us. Sometimes we need that wake up, that jolt to look at it differently. Or like, how can I look at this differently? Whether it's the run or this practice, or if they've got something outside that it's practice, it's pouring rain. How do we turn that into something fun? How do we turn that into something positive? Um, yeah, I just saw a clip of this. I remember this years back. I think it's in the book. Yeah, the book's called Fish. How do you? It is about a whole mindset shift. Like, how do you
Mm-hmm.
love what you're doing, even though you might not be doing what you love? And it's these guys who are doing fishmongering, right, in the Seattle Pike
Yeah,
Street. So I saw
Seattle,
this.
the Pike Place Fish Market. Yeah, yeah. That
Yeah,
was
so this,
that was such a pivotal book. I remember when you read. Haven't thought about that book in ages, but yeah, that was such a great book.
right? Like you could be doing something monotonous, but can you have a different, making kids lunches, changing diapers, I feel like it ties into everything we're talking about here, right? But can you turn that into something that's fun, right? Can you turn that, like those guys turn something that's stinky and potentially monotonous every day, selling fish, but they've turned it into being world famous and like
Mm-hmm.
an entertainment for people. Like I think it's a beautiful, beautiful example of how do you turn that couch and that cloth into something magical.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, like I remember, he's no longer here, but the guy used to come get our recycling every week. My
Hmm.
kids would run to the window when they heard the recycling truck coming, because the guy that came and got the recycling, who's always singing, and so my kids would always go to the window to see what he was going to be singing today. And I remember thinking, like, that's so cool. And I remember at one point, like, going out, and it turns out the guy is I think he's Nigerian, something like that. And he spoke very, very broken English. But I remember going out, like, hey, but whatever you're doing is great. My daughters love coming up to the window and watching you whenever you come by. It's so exciting. So I just remember thanking him for just making this cool. And
Right.
he didn't really get. I don't know that he understood what I was saying, but kind of just went on and was doing his thing, and he's like dancing and singing as he's getting the recycling. Yes, it's so cool.
It's funny. I also remember a guy I used to come around, and the garbage guy who came around and had a Superman outfit on, like a Superman shirt, and the guy was like jacked,
Oh
and
wow.
he you could just see him like he's using his job as his workout, like he's purposely lifting the heaviest stuff, and he's running, and so he's getting his fitness doing his job. But again, it could be pretty easy to look at being I don't know what the proper term for it is, but someone who collects garbage, you could look at that as something that could be very monotonous every day. But here's a guy that you're talking about that's singing. Here's another guy that's using it to work out. They've
Hmm.
turned it into something fun. Um, yeah, it feels like we talked about this a little bit, touched on it similarly, but from a different perspective last week on the about the movie. It's Life's Beautiful,
Hmm.
but how to turn something. That's a pretty extreme case. But in our what we're talking about here, just turning something ordinary into something extraordinary.
Yeah. A bunch of blankets into a castle.
Yeah. It's a great thought to carry forward into our mornings here. In terms of getting our kiddos ready to school, how do we turn making breakfast into being a world-class chef at a Michelin-star restaurant this morning?
Yeah. My kids will have Michelin-star oatmeal this morning. Awesome, man. Well, enjoy the day. May you
Yeah,
see the
you too, and
magic
everyone listening.
in
Appreciate,
you.
yeah, appreciate you
I
tuning
appreciate
in.
you, man.
Appreciate you. All right, bro.
Talk to you soon.